Hey everybody, I'm Jason Benton. Welcome to another 5-Minute Friday. On these 5-Minute Friday segments, I just take 5-ish minutes to answer some of the most common questions that I get about woodworking, tools, social media, all kinds of different things. This is my platform to answer those questions. So let's go ahead and get 5 minutes on the clock and we'll get into today's topic. So for anybody that's been following me for a while knows that I am a fan of Woodpeckers Tools. And with that, it seems to be one of the most common questions that I get asked. More specifically, hey, which tools do you use the most and which tools do you use the least? So let's just go ahead and get into it. As you can see, this is the arrangement of my Woodpeckers tools and everything is here, minus one of my Polini pocket rules, which is in my apron because I use it so much. And so let's go ahead and just start it off like that. Hands down, the most used Woodpeckers tool that I have in my shop, without question, are the Polini pocket rules, specifically the 6-inch. It is by far the most used measuring device in my shop, next to the Incra Tiny T. Everybody knows that I'm a big fan of that, but Polini pocket rules, could not live without. Thank you, Woodpeckers, for making them. The second most used thing is the T-squares. I really like the T-squares, more specifically the TS600. I used to have the TS24, decided to replace it because this is one of the few tools from Woodpeckers that I actually use for marking. The Polini rule and the T-squares, and this is very helpful when I'm doing drawer slides, so I decided to go with metric on this. The next thing is definitely the squares, and the order that I use the squares, the most to the least, is from the largest to the smallest. I use the 1281 the most. I just like the larger size. In most cases, for the things that I'm building, it works really well. And then the 851, next most used. And to be honest with you, the 641 I almost never use because I keep a different square in my apron most of the time, and it's one of the Incra squares. Not that I have anything against, or I think one is better than the other, it's just kind of the way it worked out. And then finally, I do find the straight edge rulers to be very helpful, specifically the ones, I usually will get them with a center scale. Back when I was using them for measuring reasons, it was really nice to have, but do I need all three of these now? No. Or am I glad that I have them when I need them? Yes, but I don't use them nearly as often as I used to, but the one I use the most is probably going to be the 24-inch. All right, so now for the things that I don't really use all that often. Now, let me preface this with saying I don't use it all that often, but there are times where I do need them, and it is nice to have them. So just because I say I don't use them a lot, please don't leave in the comments section below like, oh, please send me all the stuff you're not using, because that's not what I'm saying. So the first thing is these corner clamping blocks, which essentially, you use these. If you were to have, trying to clamp up a mitered edge, you would place these on the board like this, and then you can put a clamp across, this way from up here to down here, and it's gonna apply that pressure. I find them to be more trouble than they're actually worth, which is why I have not really messed with them all that much. It's not that I don't think the design is cool, it's just that I don't find I really have a need for them that much. The next thing is the precision triangle, and this is the one that actually detaches from itself and turns into two. It's very, very rare that I ever need to use that. Sometimes I do use it, it's nice to have, but again, for the most part, it doesn't get used too much in my shop. The next thing is these Woodpeckers clamping squares. I think these are great, and they do a very good job. Half the time I forget that I have them, or I find that I don't need them because I'm not really trying to force anything to go square, and if I clamp it up and it's square, I just don't really find I have a need for this. On some larger projects, I will reach for these. My only gripe with them, and the thing that I have experienced so far, is when you use these clamps to tighten everything down, sometimes they do have a tendency, depending on how much pressure you put, because these have some sharp edges, to leave some marks on the wood. And there's ways that you can get around it, but for me, I just haven't really found it to be needed all that much. And then finally, the thing that I get probably the most questions about, and that is the track square. And here's what I'm gonna tell you, I don't use that. I bought it right when it came out. As soon as I saw it, I was like, yep, I have to have that. I bought it, I used it a few times, and I immediately went back to my TSO products. Now, the reason I still have this, and it's still hanging here, is because I have a YouTube video where I'm going to be comparing that to some of the other options on the market. As soon as that video is done, this will be finding a new home. And I want to be very clear, I'm not saying any of this because I think it's a piece of crap, because that's not the case at all. It's actually quite opposite. In terms of build quality and what it is, it's phenomenal. I mean, it is a very nicely built track square. But because it's so nicely built, it's quite a bit heavier than what I like to use. And the other thing that I am not the biggest fan of is that it can only be used from one direction. It's only designed to be used from this edge touching the wood. As where my TSO, I can slide it and use either side, and it actually does come in very handy from time to time. And my final comments about the track square, again, while this will not be staying in my shop just because I don't have a use for it, if you're somebody that is doing a lot of angled cuts with a track saw and you want that peace of mind and basically take out the user error of like just setting your track down, because for me, if I'm doing angled cuts, I'm just gonna mark my lines, set the track down, I'm gonna make my cut. But that's because I'm very comfortable with the track saw. But for those that kind of just want to set an angle and place it up to the board, I really don't think you can find a better option on the market than this, because I can do anything from 0 to 60 degrees with that. Have I ever used that? No. Do I ever plan on using that? Absolutely not. So there you have it. Those are my most used Woodpeckers tools and my least used Woodpeckers tools, and why they are the most and least used tools. And I don't want anybody to walk away from this video thinking that I'm bad-mouthing woodpeckers. Couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth, seeing as how I've invested so much money in Woodpeckers tools. I obviously like the company. I obviously like the tools. I just want to answer the questions that I get most often. And in this case, what do I use most? What do I use least? Hopefully you guys found this information helpful. If you guys have recommendations for any YouTube video, but more specifically the 5-Minute Friday segments, please go over to my website. I actually have a form on there now that you can fill out, and it'll go to an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll be able to categorize everything and really get an idea of what it is my audience wants to see. And it really just helps me determine what videos I need to be making. That's gonna do it for this week's 5-Minute Friday. I really hope you guys found it helpful. As always, until next time, get out in the shop, try something new, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.